Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up,
Welcome all you citizens of the world, you friends, you neighbors, you family. Welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland Show. From Chicago, I'm Michael James. I'm your host this morning, and this is number 101 during the time of the pandemic, when we've been doing them from home rather at the wonderful WLUW studios downtown. We are based with WLUW. You can also get us on youtube.com/Heartland Media, on CAN TV, on Spotify and Google podcasts. And we're recording on Friday the 13th for the week of May 14th. One good thing that happened this week, it wasn't such a good thing, but I had tickets to the Sox game on Wednesday afternoon. I got a call from my friend who had given me the tickets saying that the game was canceled due to COVID. I said, what do you mean? We're inside. There are some people on the field. But then the announcement came. But it turned into a really wonderful afternoon with my friend Peter Kuttner, driving around down in Bridgeport and to and from, and stopping at the Ducks or the Dukes over on Ashland Avenue for a Polish sausage, which we had hoped to get in the White Sox park. On a more negative note, sadder note, challenging note, the war in Ukraine continues. It's such a tragedy to watch what's going on over there, but it is heartening to see the response. And of course, it comes back and plays politics here. People in support of the Ukraine and other people not wanting to give up the money in Congress. We'll see, but it is a very sad situation. Another sad situation is a 51-year-old Al Jazeera journalist, Shireen Abdu Aqilah, was murdered during the Israeli Defense Force raid on this past Wednesday in the city of Jenin in occupied West Bank. It's just another in a long list of war crimes against journalists involving the Israeli military. Remember, it was only last year that the Israelis strategically bombed the Associated Press headquarters in Gaza during one of their routine onslaughts. There will be a demonstration on calling for justice, as well as a remembrance of the 74th anniversary of the Nakba, Israeli Independence Day, will take place on Ida B. Wells Drive and Michigan Avenue on Sunday. That would be tomorrow if you're listening on air. Okay, I went to look up progressive news, and I came up with Jake Johnson in Common Dreams reporting today that during a rally in support of U.S. House candidate Summer Lee on Thursday, Senator Bernie Sanders, called out super PACs bankrolled by the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee and billionaire donors for spending big to crush progressives. We're talking Pennsylvania and across the country. Bernie Sanders called this attempt pathetic and corrosive to democracy. And if you want to really get into it, there is a piece in the Washington Post from 5/12, which would have been Thursday, called The Trailer, The Empire Strikes Back. Wave of PAC money buries the left-wing Democrats, by a guy named David Weigel in the Washington Post. Here in Chicago, sometimes we look at Axios reporting and done by Monica Eng and our friend Justin Kaufman, and they report today that one big thing, free lead pipe replacements. And it does mention how the city got federal money to deal with lead pipes. It didn't go as far or used in the way it was supposed to, but things are changing. So I would suggest people look into that. And you don't have to make that much money or that little money to get your house done. So it's something that it intrigued me, and I'm going to follow it up. Back down in Texas again, the Treasury Department has opened an investigation into Governor Abbott's use of federal funds for his border mission. Governor Greg Abbott has used COVID relief fund dollars to support the border security mission, and has come under scrutiny in Washington this week with questions from the Treasury Department. that's enough of that. But just know that Texas is in play in the governor's race. We're rooting for, if we can say that, we are rooting for Beto O'Rourke. And we got a little picture of his sign here. And probably you'll hear a lot more about the Texas race, not only from us, but other places. On an outrageous kind of a front, the Delaware State women's lacrosse team, this is a traditional, historically Black college. They were down in Georgia for a game, and their bus was stopped en route to on their way home. And the police used drug sniffing dogs, basically said, we know there's some weed in here. You better speak up or we're going to get in real trouble. It really was kind of outrageous. And the excuse for pulling them over was they were not in the proper lane. There's a lot of play on this one, a lot of people talking about it on air. You're going to probably hear more about it. On the labor front, a few months back, we reported that the congressional staffers wanted to organize a union, and they got a green light from the House to unionize last Tuesday. The Congressional Workers Union will now be allowed to collectively bargain, and a flurry of organizing is expected to follow the decision in the upcoming months. Here home in Chicago, the mayor's race that's coming up in next year is getting a little more crowded. Another guy named Cam Buckner, he's a state representative. He just threw his hat in the ring. The far-right candidate, John Katsundara of the union, he's the union president of Police Lodge, Fraternal Order of Police. Another candidate is Frederick Collins, a police officer. There's the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, and there's Alderman Ray Lopez. I think given that field, I still like our Mayor Lightfoot. And here in Rogers Park, Alderwoman Maria Haddon has reported that there are now flotation devices and life rings being installed along the entire shoreline just in time for the summer season. Some of you will remember last year there were a number of people trying to get more safety enhancing measures in place along the lake, and apparently that has come to fruition. You are listening to the Live from the Heartland show, or you may be watching it. We are going to come back with our first guest shortly, and before we do that, we're going to play a little music, and I think we're going to do Solidarity Forever by someone. Okay, we'll be right back with more Live from the Heartland. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving. It's the wonders we have made, but the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever.
Welcome back to the Live from the Heartland show, and that was Solidarity Forever. And we're all about Solidarity Forever with people who are working to make the world a better place. And I'm really happy to bring on the show now someone I've known since 1960, and that is the one, the only Carole Travis. Good morning to you, Carole.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. First of all, I want to wish you a very happy birthday. I'm not sure of the date, but I know it's either happened or it's coming up.
It's coming up.
Welcome to the Ochenta Club with me.
Yes, indeed. 1942.
Right on. That's the year.
You, me, and Bernadine, and many others.
Many others. A lot of people we know are
right.
A lot of old people. Well, one of the things I like to do on the show is to not only talk with friends and see what they're up to and get them to report on what they've done, but to really put together a number of interviews over time with people who did good in the world, and you're certainly one of those. So I want to get you to talk about your life a little bit. You're a lifelong progressive. You've got a lot of things that you will point to in the course of this interview that you've been involved with. You come from a line of progressives. in getting your photograph for to use in the promotion. It had a picture of you and it said red diaper underneath it. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you became a lifelong progressive.
Well, I think like most humans, we come out of the background that we were born into or rebelling against the background we were born into. And I come out of the background I was born into. So my father was a communist and an important communist, although that wasn't his big, he wasn't a public communist.
Right.
Because he was so important in the union movement. The Communist Party didn't want him to be out there as a communist, but he was a communist. And his third wife, his first wife died. It was a childhood sweetheart. His second wife was my mother. His third wife had been married previously and had been was very rich. And her first husband was very rich. And they did stuff all over Europe in the underground and were very close to the Spanish, the French, and the Italian underground and helped fund it and so on. My father led a Seminole strike in the 1930s, but he also organized lots of locals for the UAW and for farm equipment workers, which was the left, the commie union. And he advocated that the FE merge with UAW. Some people were against that, but he was for it. He was not sectarian in his nature. The Flint sit-down strike has a new book. You'll hold it up. There it is, Midnight in Vehicle City. General Motors, Flint, and the strike that created the middle class. And that's something that I've always understood. The strike was the first big strike of the CIO, which was the Congress of Industrial Organizations, which had broken with the AFL, which was primarily a skilled trades organization. And the CIO, when they organized General Motors and Flint, the first strike organized 13 of General Motors's plants across the country. They had more than that, but it did organize 13 of them. And I believe that the premise and the title of that book is correct. That was because it organized ordinary working people, and it was a breakthrough strike, and it inspired all kinds of other strikes out of it. So I come out of that, but I was a wild in the streets, 60s radical, founder of a cult, small lefty organization, which didn't do a lot of recruiting, so it wasn't as famous as OL or RU. But Sojourner Truth Organization has a book about that called Truth and Revolution by Michael Staudenmeier. And Noel Ignatieff, then Ignatin, was one of our founders. May he rest in peace, was one of our founders also, who was with Ted Allen, one of the theoretical underpinnings of white blind spot, white supremacy, white skin privilege. That came from Noel and Ted. And so I did that, and I was part of staff of various national organizations. I was on the MOB staff, the National Mobilization to End the War in Vietnam, for the inauguration. I was on the staff of the Organization for the Democratic Party. I was in 68, I was on the staff of the Conspiracy Trial Defense Committee in 69. There's other things in there, too long, too much.
Well, we'll come back. Let me just a couple of things. Going back to when we first knew each other.
Yeah,
I do remember meeting your dad and your mother, Sophie. And you and I were both involved with some other people in putting together at Lake Forest College a little socialist group called the what did we call it? The
Jacobins, wasn't it?
Jacobin Society.
Right.
And I remember Joffrey Stewart, who was a Chicago anarchist. I don't know what's happened to him. I think he's probably,
I'm sure he's dead. Yeah.
but I remember him burning a draft card, and this was back in the early 60s.
Right.
And on the Flint strike, which I'd always heard about, and I'd heard from you or somewhere how they had called your dad Fighting Bob Travis. This book is really a wonderful book.
Yes, it is.
And it's written by a fellow named Edward McClellan, who it turns out was a customer at the Heartland.
Right.
And I remember the only time I really remember talking to him was he had a book on Obama out, the Young Mr. Obama or something. And he didn't mention Obama at the Heartland, which I think was a really crucial time in that campaign. That's when Axelrod thought Obama probably had a real shot at winning the Senate.
Right.
But Ted, I did talk to Ted, or we texted each other, and he's going to come on and talk not only about this book and others, but the Flint strike. Your dad, in the book, it says he didn't really want to go over to Flint. He had led a successful strike over in Toledo, but he was real good, and they brought him in. And the result of the strike was they did 17 plants. They were on strike 44 days. It was called the strike heard round the world. They got benefits, medical, retirement, etc., really becoming part of the middle class. And it's worth the read. When the sit-down strike started, I think there were 30,000 members of the United Auto Workers. And by the end of 1937, there were 375,000. So this really changed things. And after General Motors fell, then Chrysler and Ford fell in line too. Carole, Travis, do you remember your dad talking to you about the strike at ever? Do you have any little things that you want to share?
Well, I remember him talking to me about the strike. I remember him talking to me about Toledo and some things that happened in Toledo. He was the first president of UAW Local 14. He was made the official director of the Flint sit-down strike, replacing a guy named Wyndham Mortimer, who was his mentor. My father was in his late 30s, and Mort, as he was known, was in his 50s. And they did a lot. What they did there initially was they got the trust of the workers, because the people who had been there previously as the union leadership were company spies. And so if you joined the union, a little bit later, you were fired or laid off. And so they did a bunch of things. Also, they did in-home meetings, and they would have meetings with the family, with the husband and the wife. And they would say, if you would have an underground meeting here, we'll provide you with enough for the coffee and donuts or cider and cookies, or whatever you would like. And so the women were involved right from the beginning. But the stories, there are a million stories, really, and I feel very guilty about not writing them. Actually, Henry Krause's wife, Dorothy Krause, who was, Henry did the newspaper there, and he's quoted in the book. Dorothy was one of the leaders of the Women's Brigade. And she called me just before she died and said, you have to write a book about your father, because nobody knows about your father. And if I had been closer to the age I am now, I would have said yes, even if I wasn't going to do it, because she was so desperate to want that to happen. But I said, I don't write, and I really don't, even though I have swirling stories in my head. But Flint, the working conditions were terrible when the strike happened. One story is that, I don't know if it was my father or Mort, but they were talking to a family about having an underground meeting, and the son came home. The father worked there and the son worked there. And the son came home from the shift, and he walked in the door and he fell on the floor and couldn't move because he was so tired. He finally got up, went into a back room, and began vomiting, retching. My father said, what's going on? Or Mort said, what's going on? And they said, oh, he always does that. He comes home exhausted. He'll be all right. And the guy went out the back door. I think there's probably outhouses there. I don't know. But in any case, That's the kind of misery. There was no, the factory floors, a lot of them, not all of them, depends what floor you were in the factory, but a lot of them had dirt floors. And if you had to take a piss, you went in the corner and pissed and then ran back to pissed in a bucket or something and ran back to the lawn.
There's one thing in there where the foreman tells the guy he has to wait,
Yeah.
Well, Carole, go ahead.
There were a lot of communists there, and there were a lot of socialists there. And they were not sent in as organizers. They were people who, because of the times and the strength of ideology, which was crushed in the 1950s by McCarthyism and put an end to class consciousness for some period of time. I mean, you couldn't say working class in the United States until probably the last 10 years. It was always middle class, not working class. And that attack on that kind of consciousness really was crippling later on. But the history does not reflect the role of socialists and communists in making the United States the experiment that we were, of a having a middle class, or having nothing's too good for the working class, is what Big Bill Haywood said. So,
well, Carole, let's bring it a little closer to where we're at now. You followed in your father's footsteps and became an organizer and president of a General Motors local of 10,000 somewhere around Chicago, making engines for locomotives.
Locomotives, not making engines, making locomotives.
So tell us about
the whole. I won't use the word I would normally use. The whole damn thing. But president of UAW Local 719, which no longer exists. The plant eventually was closed. At one point, it had 14,000 people in the bargaining unit, and then it had like 8 to 10,000 management or people, because it was a division unlike the rest of cars and trucks, which had purchasing and testing and so on done centrally. Because we were a locomotive plant, we had our own sales, our own testing, our own marketing, our own this, that, and so on. And at one point, 80% of the locomotives on the rails in the United States were from our factory. I can still recognize our things by the shape of the fuel tank.
So they don't make locomotives anymore? General Motors doesn't?
No.
So it's just gone.
Really what General Electric knocked them out by using by their engine plant for their locomotive being made almost entirely by robots. And our work, when I worked there, which was between 72 and 92, we had great, and I still have great healthcare. I have vision, hearing, legal, in addition to healthcare, and with my Medicaid stuff, Medicare. But it was residual from what happened in 1930. Really, it was a leftover because of how strong the UAW became in the big three, and also a lot of other kinds of plants too, but Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors, yeah.
So after your stint as the president of the UAW plant, you moved to California, and
No. I was hired by SEIU.
Okay.
To be originally the Midwest Regional Coordinator for Service Employees International Union, but then they changed their structure, and I became executive director of the Illinois State Council for a short time. And then I asked to be transferred to California, and they transferred me to California, and I was doing various contract negotiations in the public sector up and down the state, but mostly around Ventura, California.
You also, while you were in California, I know Steve was involved. Your husband, Steve Tapas, my cohort in founding Rising Up Angry.
Mhm.
He did a lot of prison work up at Pelican Bay
He became very close to one particular solitary confinement guy we've now gotten out. I was a lawyer. I became a lawyer in night school starting in while I was at Electromotive Division as the president of UAW, but then continued and finished while I was the executive director of SEIU. So I'm a lawyer in Illinois, and because I was a lawyer in California, but not a member of the California bar, and because I was retired, there was a hunger strike at Pelican Bay, which is the supermax up near the Oregon border, and a lawsuit developed as a result of the hunger strike and getting the attention of lawyers. And the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York became the lead lawyer group, but also Manges Gottschalk, Manges Gottschalk, which is an international firm, became our pro bono partner. So there was this incredible team of constitutional lawyers and experienced lawyers who took on the abusive use of long-term solitary confinement in the California prison system. And because I was a lawyer and recognized by the prison system as a lawyer, although not by the courts, because I lived there and was not a member of their bar, I became one of 3 lawyers who did most of the visiting with prisoners. And so I know a tremendous number of prisoners, a number of whom are out now. And most of them that we dealt with are out of solitary, even those that remain in prison. But California is the biggest prison system in the world. It's really horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, not as horrible as some other places, but pretty effing horrible.
Well, Carole Travis, we are living now in 2022, and the country has a pretty serious divide. There does appear to be rising consciousness in some sectors, an increase in union organizing. What's your take on our current situation, and what do you think that people should be doing?
Well, I have an unusual take.
I'm waiting to hear it.
I actually think that there's a lot of denial on climate, and that without the planet, nothing else is going to matter. It's true that the conditions of workers are awful in some places, and that there have been some successes in organizing. But I think that, and I understand why people are in denial, because the situation feels so terrible. It feels like, why talk about that? The conditions in some of the places where people work are horrific, but I don't think they're as horrific as they were previously. No. Although some of the slaughterhouses, I think the meat packing places are probably as bad as any place has ever been.
In the news today, they talk about how the meat packing companies really pushed the Trump administration people to go light on the COVID stuff. And a lot of those workers in the meat packing industry out on the plains really came down.
They died. A lot of them died. And a lot of them were like Somali immigrants. So there was a use of people who were desperate for work. And it's very hard, I think, to do some of the organizing that we would want to do if we, that was our focus. I mean, it's hard to get people, especially during the pandemic, although I think that's waning, to boycott Amazon. I mean, it's just not going to happen to the extent that you cripple them. And you have to be able to cripple these guys for the most part to be able to really win something sustained. And in Asheville, which is near where I live now, the latest Starbucks just lost. Now, I don't know why. It was a vote of like 13-6. So 6 people voted yes and 13 people voted no. I don't know why. I know that the woman who organized was devastated. We also have a nurses strike that won the right to collective bargain. Is it time? Are we over? Are we done?
No, that was someone calling me.
Okay. So the nurses won the right to collective bargain here at Mission Hospital, which was a very well-known, good hospital for a long time, and it was purchased by HCA, who are ruthless, merciless, greedy MFers who don't care about people or patients or workers or anything but money. And the nurses, a lot of the nurses have left, doctors have left the hospital, and they've closed a lot of the rural clinics that were important. So it's very tough to organize. I mean, there are some people out there like Jane McElvaney or whatever her name is, who thinks she's got the answer to how you do this, and that, if everybody just listened to Jane, the world would be better.
I don't know anything about that.
Well, don't even worry about her.
Okay. Carole, we're going to run out of time. You got any parting words for young people, old people, and to march forward and do good in the world?
There is, there's so much needed right now, and it's not going to be any better without doing things. I actually am a big advocate now of everybody voting Democratic, because I think one of the big looming challenges is fascism and the white supremacists and so on. And I think we have to support the Democratic Party, and we have to do it big. And it's really a dangerous moment.
Well, it's really great to see you via Zoom. I apologize that I didn't make it through there on my spring ride. I had hoped to, but I think that you should get to work on this book. And if you have to, we'll start doing interviews via Zoom with you telling stories. Okay. You got a lot to share, sister. And I want to tell you, I love you from the bottom of my heart.
Me too, Michael.
See you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. You are listening to the Live from the Heartland show, and we will be right back with our other good old friend who's coming on, Michael McGraw Piranha, and we're going to come in, or we're going to go out with Carole and come in with Michael doing his Hawaiian soul tune. Okay, stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Down to big rides, check out the show. Went up down south, mean a big waves, In the back of your mind, you think Eddie would go. He had Hawaiian soul, got Hawaiian soul. Hey! Hawaiian soul.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland, and that was Hawaiian Soul by our old pal, our good pal, Mike Piranha, aka Michael McGraw from Kelly High School on the South Side. We go way back to Rising Up Angry. You and your cohorts had a band called Killin' Floor. You did a Rising Up Angry benefit at Mo Ming, the dance studio. And I have followed your career. You have always been a rebellious dude. I should know I was your boss when you worked at the Heartland. You moved to Hawaii. You continued playing music. You recently got an award. I thought it would be good to have you back on the show, because it wasn't that long ago that we had you, to talk about the award that you got, the music scene, and to play the role permanently now as our man in Hawaii with news about what's going on that you think people over here in the rest of the country and the world should want to know. So good morning to you, Michael Piranha McGraw.
Good morning. Thank you for appointing me your secret agent in the Mid-Pacific. I'm double O.
You'd have an interesting perspective being out there in the middle of the ocean.
I do. I love this place, obviously. I came here in 1978. Our deal was we were booked by a company called the GMA, the Good Music Agency. And believe it or not, they booked a ton of Chicago rock bands, but they were based out of Missoula, Montana, someplace I've never been, but they handled all our bookings. And they called me one day and said, if you guys will tour northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and Manitoba throughout the winter, we'll send you to Hawaii for 13 weeks. So we did. We toured that for about 4 months, came back, and they said, they loved you. Can you go back and tour that again if you're not dead from freezing? And we said, sure. So we did 2 tours there with the whole winter. And then they sent us to Hawaii for 13 weeks. We fired them and stayed here for 14 months. And then we came back every year for 10 years. Then I moved here.
And since then, you've gotten married, had kids, all kind of stuff going on in your life.
Yeah. I've been here 30 years now. So, more than half my life in Chicago, Pittsburgh and Chicago, and then here, I split it up pretty evenly, and I've loved the entire experience.
Well, you had talked about moving back to the mainland, but and up into Canada, but you're not going to do that. And I'm so glad, because I had hoped to come out and see you. I had bought a ticket. COVID came down, so I'm probably not coming until around Thanksgiving time next year. And
I know, and I think we'll be here, and we of course want you here. You and I have planned your visit several times, and then COVID came up, and like Chevy Chase said to Bill Murray in Caddyshack, he said, I have a pool and I have a pond. The pond's good for you to swim in. So we have a pool and a pond. So no, we don't have either.
You have a lake, you have an ocean.
We have an ocean. We can't wait for you to see.
Let me ask you, before I even ask you about this award you just got for your wonderful album, which I will hold up, and it's going to be, I've already sent a picture, so we'll use it, but it is called Diamond Head Road. Yeah. Why don't you tell me a little bit what's going on Diamond Head Road in terms of climate change? So I've had some relatives just come back from Hawaii, and they said, things are changing out there, and you can tell.
We're droughting. This is a peculiar. We drought every few years. I mean, climate change didn't start, when I woke up this morning. We've created a bag of crap to hand to future generations, and we're still playing a part in that. But it's been really droughty. For the first time ever in my time here, the Board of Waters come on and ask to please conserve and not to water lawns, and so it's dry. So when it does rain, it's odd weather even for us. We're still the most fortunate weather place maybe on the planet. What could beat us? Tahiti. I mean,
didn't you have a water issue too with the government and some water with U.S.?
Yeah, the Red Hill tanks were getting filled with petroleum of some source from a leak on the Red Hills owned by the Army, and then and there was some kind of I don't have all the details. I kind of tune that stuff out because the news agencies here just focus on it, and I'm kind of done with it. Yeah, the military did not address a leak that was getting into the water that the military families on base were using for their water, and it was making children sick and adults sick, and they had to shut down the tanks. Finally, the governor shut it down.
Tell us a little bit about the music scene and this award you got just recently for your album Diamond Head Road.
Well, we got put into a coma like everybody else during the COVID pandemic, the shutdown. There was no live music, there was no hotels. So, we're 90% dependent on visitors. I mean, we even get our pineapples from the Philippines. Okay, we don't grow them here anymore, really, and we depend on visitors for our entire livelihood. I mean, you could get on H1 here, and why there's an interstate in Hawaii, I'll never be able to figure out. But you can get on Interstate H1. And if you count the 18-wheeler trucks, you're still going to have room on your hand. We don't do much hauling, much of anything except make sure people are really happy when they get here. Now, other stuff goes on, of course. There's some agriculture and all that, but we really are a visitor's mecca. So we got hit hard. The musicians we have a ton of great musicians here. It's one of the reasons I stayed. I mean, there's guys unloading ships from Young Brothers that come in to dock in the piers that sit down on their break and play virtuoso ukulele and guitar during lunch. And they have voices like angels. It's an incredibly musical place. So I felt like I was right at home all the time when I was here, and I offer the rock, and they call me the rock guy. It's the OG, the rock guy. There he is, So it's a role I like. I like filling, and most of the
album, you got a lot of people on this album, and I remember you talking about you were really excited. So what do you got? How's it doing?
It's flying off the shelves like a herd of turtles stampeding through a cloud of pancake batter. People don't do much hard copy anymore, but it got real good reviews, and it comes well recommended. We did a show where I performed the entire album on January 14th. A couple musicians flew in for it. Gary Lux, my mixer, flew in from Los Angeles to play bass. Tom Piranha flew in from Portland to play drums and sing, and Steve Utstein, a virtuoso keyboardist and cellist, flew in from San Francisco. We filled the house, and that was right when the restrictions were lifted. There was still masking while walking through the club restrictions, masks off at the table but we packed the club. I didn't hear anybody got infected from it. The first thing I asked from the stage was, if you get up, and I want you to get up and have cocktails because it makes our club owners happy, mask up. And everybody did, and they even masked up to dance. So we managed to put that across. We had a great celebration. Here, I mean, Jack Johnson lives here. He sold 30 million copies of everything he's recorded. If he walks into a place, Hawaii's different. Nobody bothers him. Hey, Jack. There's no that whole hero worship, idol worship thing. It's really never taken hold here. It's just cool.
Jack Johnson, tell me who this Jack Johnson is, because I know the fighter Jack Johnson was buried on
Jack Johnson's a very famous
at
recording.
Irving Park and Clark Street in the Jewish cemetery.
Yeah, this guy is just a handsome surfer that writes great songs and lives up in on the North Shore in Waimea, and he sold 20 million copies of his stuff. Wow. I mean, I'll send you some links there, Gramps.
One of the songs that you have, I don't know if it's this album or another album, but it's about Sherman, General Sherman in the Civil War. Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your interest in Sherman.
I read books on Revolutionary War and Civil War history. I'm extremely interested to see if the situation was never changing as far as the division in this country. And it's pretty true that it's always been pretty much percentile wise exactly how it is now. But I'm a huge devotee of Ulysses Grant. I think he was the most altruistic and well-intentioned president, along with Lincoln and Washington. There was nobody like Grant. He saved the Union. In fact, I just finished a book called The Man Who Saved the Union. And before that, I read Fierce Patriot, the William Sherman book. And they were just, notwithstanding the way that the Native Americans were treated, because that was just a whole nother case. They saved the Union. They made sure that the right side won, and they were fiercely patriotic and altruistic people. And Sherman we wouldn't have won. Like I wrote in the last verse of that, if it wasn't for the steel of Uncle Billy, it might be Jefferson Davis on your $5 bill. And that's true. Sherman and Grant hooeyed together. They got together and said, it has to be total warfare, or else the South's going to win like we won the Revolutionary War. We avoided the British on large territory and wore out their money. So they said, screw it, and they quit. The North would have done that if the South would have played guerrilla warfare, but Sherman and Grant didn't let them. So I'm a big fan of the guys who really wanted to save the Union, because I'm a Union guy.
Yeah. So what? That's a Union hat, or that's
a Benevolent Order of the Elks hat, Local 616, which I'm a member. So the
Elks is a union, or
well, the Elks was in 1867, a small group of actors and entertainers wanted to drink on dry days in New York City, and they couldn't because of the laws. So they started a private meeting called the Jolly Corks. That's what they called themselves, the Jolly Corks. So they could drink on the weekends. And then when one of the Jolly Corks died, they put together some benefits to benefit his family. And they realized they really liked taking care of actors, entertainers, and war veterans. And then they formed the Benevolent Order of the Elks, which is something I wanted to bring up for you because you have the Buffalo Bar for so many years, and Buffalo is one of your nicknames. I used to call you Buff forever when I
Call me the
worked for
Buffalo.
you. Yeah. So the vote was to be the Benevolent Protective Order of the Buffalo, and it got outvoted by 8-7 to be Elks. And you know, whenever I see an old Honeymooners episode and they have a meeting of the raccoons, you know, I think of you because buffalo, raccoon, elk, you know, it's all there.
I like elks too, and there's a certain tequila, I forget the name of it, but it has an elk on it that I do participate in once in a while. Let me ask you a little bit. You mentioned, I think, well, maybe you didn't, but there are native people in Hawaii, and there was this kind of split sometimes between the native population back in the day, maybe still, and the later comers. And recently, in all this stuff about the number of Native American kids who died in boarding schools, they include people from Hawaii in that.
Yeah.
So I just wonder if you could address in the time we have left, what's it like on the island with the people and the Native community, people getting along, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, the spirit of aloha, which is love and acceptance, aloha literally translated from Hawaiian means alo is face to face, and ha is your being or your breath. So breathing face to face is how they describe love. So the spirit of aloha has always been alive here, and the acceptance, even between factions that aren't happy with each other, has always existed. But you know, Sanford Dole raped this empire, and that's still trying to be resolved. I mean, Grover Cleveland was president when the rebellion happened, and the Hawaiian palace was charged, and Queen Liliuokalani was put under house arrest, and Dole and the other planters took over the island. And Grover Cleveland said, "Give it back to the Republic of Hawaii." And Sanford Dole said, "No, come get us." You know, it's the late it's 1897. Send ships, and you know, it was just impossible to enforce. It was the furthest away place in the world to most Americans, and Dole saw what it was and got together with his cohorts, and you know, that resentment has simmered for 150 years.
You know, my dad, his father worked for Libby, and my dad used to have summer jobs, and at sometime in the late teens, he was, I think, on Molokai working on a pineapple plantation. And he used to tell us about how he could look down and see the leper colony from where he was. So I'm looking to come to Hawaii. I'm going to come and sleep on your couch. And, you know, it'll be fun, Mike.
We got a bed for you.
Okay.
We're not dropping you off at the colony in Molokai.
Do you have any parting words for people who want to come to Hawaii, who want to do music, who want to change the world? What do you got, brother?
Come and breathe our clean air and swim in our perfect water, and be kind to one another. Do something nice for somebody you don't know, and don't tell a soul.
We're going to go out with a song called Our Backyard. You want to give us a little preview of what that's about?
That's from my 1999 release, and it's when I moved here in 92, and I realized that people come from all over the world just to spend everything they save to be in what I call our backyard. So it's just a song about how beautiful our land is and how grateful we are to have the visitors.
Well, Michael McGraw Piranha, you're a wonderful man. And for a long time, you've done good in the world. And I want to thank you for coming on Live from the Heartland. When you got some hot news tips from the island, you let us know and you'll be back on. Or
you are a champion, my man. You're my champion.
Right on. Thanks a lot. You are listening to the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James, and we had a couple of wonderful guests today. We had Carole Travis and we had Michael McGraw, two of my best friends in the world. And I will be back next week. I think we're going to have Chicago's, we're going to have some kind of a choir coming on and some other stuff. I want to thank all the people who make this show possible, particularly Emilio Davis, who is on the scene, recording it and doing the Zoom work. Lynn Orman Weiss, who books us some great entertainment. A special thanks to Gwen Brown, who was over at Loyola, and last week was her last week of mounting the show up on the air. And we welcome Imani Warren, who is doing that this week. And of course, Luis Mejia Arens down in Veracruz, and the incomparable Kathleen Katie Hogan and Tom Clark. That's our team. I'm Michael James. I'll be back next week. Stay tuned. Do good in the world. The world needs all the good that you do. And we're going out with Michael Piranha doing Our Backyard. Power to the people.
Mine up, bird, mine up, bird. Oh, won't you tell me what's the word?